Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to a place where your comfy mattress and a full fridge would seem like alien luxuries. Imagine waking up not to the gentle hum of your air conditioner, but to the harsh shouts of a drill sergeant, the smell of sweat and dust, and the gnawing ache of an empty stomach. You're not just observing. You are there, a newborn wailing in ancient Sparta, and frankly, you probably won't survive this. Every breath you take, every choice you make, will be scrutinized, tested, and judged against a brutal ideal of perfection. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. From the very moment you entered the world in Sparta, your fate wasn't in your parents' hands, but in the cold, unyielding grip of the state. You, a tiny, squalling bundle, wouldn't even be taken home straight from birth. Instead, you'd be brought before a council of elders, the Gerousia, at a place called the Lesche. This wasn't a baby shower. This was an inspection, a brutal, unforgiving assessment of your physical perfection. They weren't looking for cute dimples. They were looking for strength, for potential, for a flawless specimen fit to become a Spartan warrior. Any perceived weakness, any deformity, a limp, a cough, even a tiny birthmark that the elders deemed an ill omen, could seal your doom. It sounds utterly barbaric to our modern ears, doesn't it? To judge a life so new, so innocent, with such chilling detachment. Yet, for the Spartans, it was a logical, albeit ruthless, culling, a way to ensure that only the strongest, most resilient individuals would populate their warrior society. If you passed this initial inspection, a collective sigh of relief might have rippled through your new family, though they wouldn't show it too overtly. You were deemed fit to live, which, in Sparta, was merely the first hurdle in a lifetime of tests. If you failed, however, your fate was sealed. The common belief, perpetuated by ancient writers like Plutarch, was that you'd be taken to a chasm near Mount Taygetus, known as the Apothetai or place of rejection, and left to die of exposure. Imagine that chilling image. A tiny infant, abandoned to the elements, simply because they weren't deemed perfect enough. Historians still argue whether this practice was as widespread and systematic as Plutarch suggests, or if it was a more sporadic, extreme measure. Some modern scholars suggest that while infanticide certainly occurred, it might have been more often carried out by families themselves in less formal ways, or perhaps less frequently thrown into the chasm than popular lore suggests. But even if the chasm story is partly exaggerated, the underlying principle remains. The Spartan state had the ultimate say over your life from its very inception. Your early infancy, unlike perhaps your own memories of soft blankets and lullabies, would have been about hardening. Spartan mothers, it's said, were renowned for their stoicism, their refusal to coddle their children. No crying over scraped knees, no overly affectionate hugs. You wouldn't be swaddled in tight cloths. Instead, you'd be left free to move, to crawl, to build strength naturally. They'd even expose you to darkness and solitude, a rudimentary form of psychological conditioning to prepare you for the harsh realities of life. No fussy eating for you either. You'd be given just enough to survive, taught from the cradle to endure hunger, a preparation for the lean rations of the agoge. It's almost as if they were trying to build a tiny, unyielding block of granite, rather than a soft, pliable human being. You can almost hear your own inner voice, "Just 5 more minutes in bed, please?" And then the stark reality of a Spartan morning slapping you awake. You wouldn't even have a name for long, not in the way we think of personal identity. Your identity was already being subsumed by the collective. This wasn't just about physical toughening. It was about psychological molding. From the moment you were born, the message was clear. You belonged to Sparta. Your body, your mind, your very existence were assets of the state. Your parents, while they might have loved you in their own Spartan way, understood that their primary duty was to raise you to be a loyal, obedient, and formidable citizen soldier. There was no room for individual ambition or personal desires that didn't align with the state's goals. Forget dreaming of becoming a poet or a baker. Your path was predetermined, etched in stone from the moment you either passed or failed that initial, chilling inspection. And trust me, you wouldn't get a participation trophy for just showing up. So, you survived infancy, a small miracle in itself. Congratulations, or rather, the Spartan state congratulates itself on another viable future weapon. But don't get too comfortable, because your childhood, as you might understand it, simply didn't exist. At the tender age of 7, just when most kids today are losing their first tooth and learning to read, you'd be snatched from your family home. Not just you, but every Spartan boy, regardless of social standing, would begin the agoge. This wasn't some quaint boarding school. It was a brutal, state-sponsored training program designed to strip away all vestiges of individuality and forge you into an obedient, disciplined, and utterly ruthless warrior. Imagine saying goodbye to your parents, not knowing when, or even if you'd truly see them again in any meaningful way. This was your new family now, the agoge and its unforgiving masters. You'd be grouped into agelai, or herds, with other boys your age. Your new home was a communal barack, stark and comfortless. Forget privacy, it was a foreign concept. You'd eat, sleep, train, and endure punishments alongside your peers, fostering an intense sense of loyalty to the group, and absolute distrust of outsiders. Your days were meticulously structured, a relentless grind of physical exercise, military drills, and harsh discipline. There was no time for play, no stories before bed, no comforting parental presence. Your life was now about endurance, obedience, and the unceasing pursuit of physical and mental toughness. Every aspect of your existence was meticulously controlled, from the amount of food you ate, always too little, to the quality of the clothes you wore, always too sparse. Historians still argue whether the agoge truly achieved its goal of creating an army of emotionless automatons, or if it simply suppressed natural human emotions to an extreme degree. Either way, you wouldn't be writing home about your summer camp experience. Your teachers, or paidonomoi, were not gentle instructors. They were older, seasoned Spartans, often veterans, whose sole purpose was to break you down and rebuild you according to the state's specifications. They weren't there to nurture your artistic talents or encourage your independent thought. Their methods were harsh, relying heavily on corporal punishment. A wrong answer, a moment of hesitation, a perceived sign of weakness, all could earn you a swift, painful flogging. The idea wasn't just to inflict pain, but to teach you to endure it silently, without complaint, to harden your will. You were encouraged, even expected, to fight amongst yourselves. Not out of malice, but to develop combat skills, to learn to dominate, and to assert your place within the hierarchy of the agoge. It was a constant, low-level simmering of aggression, a preparation for the battlefield where such instincts would be vital. Even your intellectual education was geared towards practical application. You'd learn to read and write, but primarily for military dispatches and understanding basic commands. Eloquence wasn't valued, brevity and directness were. This is where the term laconic comes from, referring to the region of Laconia, where Sparta was located. Spartans were famous for their terse, pointed remarks. Imagine trying to explain your complicated feelings to a Spartan teacher. You'd likely be met with a blank stare, or worse, a swift reprimand for wasting time with unnecessary words. Forget philosophical debates or artistic pursuits. Your mind, like your body, was a tool for the state. You were taught songs, but they were martial hymns, songs of courage and loyalty to Sparta, not gentle lullabies. One quirky tidbit about the agoge was the cheese-stealing contest at the altar of Artemis Orthia. This wasn't a game. It was a ritual designed to test your stealth, agility, and ability to endure pain. You and your peers would attempt to steal cheeses from an altar guarded by priests wielding whips. The goal wasn't just to get the cheese, but to do so without being caught, and if you were caught, to endure the flogging without flinching or crying out. It sounds utterly insane, right? Imagine explaining that to your school principal today. But for the Spartans, it was a crucial test of character, a demonstration of the stoicism and resilience that defined their ideal warrior. The more lashes you could withstand, the greater your honor. It makes your most challenging school exams seem like a walk in the park. By the time you emerged from the agoge in your late teens, you wouldn't just be physically tough, you'd be mentally conditioned to the core. All personal desires, all individual aspirations would have been systematically suppressed. Your identity would be inextricably linked to Sparta, to your fellow warriors, and to the unwavering pursuit of military excellence. You wouldn't think of yourself as you in the modern sense, but as a cog in the mighty Spartan war machine. This was the foundation, the very bedrock, upon which all of Spartan society rested. And trust me, after years of this, your greatest luxury would be the momentary absence of pain or hunger. Having survived the brutal indoctrination of the agoge, you'd think maybe, just maybe, a nice warm meal would be in order. Think again. Your stomach, remember that gnawing ache before? Is about to become your constant companion. Spartan food was not about culinary delight. It was about bare sustenance, designed to keep you functional, not fat or content. You'd be perpetually hungry, living on rations that would make a modern diet feel like an extravagant feast. This wasn't some oversight. It was a deliberate strategy. A perpetually hungry body, they believed, was a body always eager for action, always ready to fight for a scrap. Plus, it fostered stealth. If you were truly ravenous, you'd learn to forage, to pilfer, to get what you needed without getting caught. It was a bizarre, stomach-rumbling lesson in resourcefulness. Your staple diet revolved around melas zomos, or black broth. Just the name sounds appetizing, doesn't it? Made from boiled pork, blood, salt, and vinegar. It was, by all accounts, a truly dreadful concoction. Plutarch, that ever-reliable gossip from antiquity, tells a story of a king of Pontus who, after tasting it, declared that he now understood why the Spartans were so fearless in battle. Death would surely be preferable to another bowl of that broth. Imagine that for a moment. Your main meal, day in and day out, is something so unpalatable that even a king would rather die. You wouldn't just be eating it, you'd be forced to eat it in communal dining halls known as syssitia. These were mandatory, you couldn't skip out for a cheeky takeaway. It was another way the state reinforced group identity and ensured uniform hardship. Beyond the black broth, your diet might be supplemented with a bit of cheese, some figs, and occasionally a small piece of meat. Bread was typically made from barley, coarse and heavy. Vegetables were rare and fresh fruit even rarer. Your portion sizes would be meticulously controlled by your paidonomos or the older youths in charge of your agila. There was no second helping, no sneaking extra rations. If you were caught trying to get more food than allocated, it wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a severe punishment. You were expected to endure hunger with stoicism, a grim acceptance of your lot. This constant deprivation meant your body was lean, hardened, and incredibly efficient, but also constantly craving. This deliberate underfeeding had several purposes. Firstly, it kept you physically agile and light. Spartan warriors weren't meant to be bulky brutes. They were supposed to be swift and enduring. Secondly, it honed your stealth and cunning. If you were to get more food, you had to steal it, and you had to do so without detection. Getting caught wasn't a punishment for theft. but for incompetence. It was a bizarre, sort of perverse logic training you to be a sneaky scoundrel in the name of military virtue. Historians still argue whether the extreme scarcity was purely for military training or also a method of social control, keeping the populace too preoccupied with basic needs to foment dissent. Regardless, your daily life would be a testament to the fact that hunger is, indeed, the best sauce. Though, in Sparta, even the best sauce might not make black broth taste good. Think about your own relationship with food. The effortless access to a myriad of cuisines, the joy of a satisfying meal, the comfort of a midnight snack. In Sparta, those simple pleasures were non-existent. Every morsel was a functional necessity, not a source of enjoyment. You'd probably find yourself dreaming of a simple roasted chicken, or even just a full loaf of bread, a concept so foreign to your Spartan reality it would border on fantasy. Your body, accustomed to scarcity, would adapt, becoming remarkably efficient at extracting every bit of energy from the meager fare. This wasn't just physical training, it was mental conditioning on a profound level. You learned to suppress cravings, to push past discomfort, to accept hunger as a natural state rather than an emergency. It makes you appreciate that instant noodle soup a little more, doesn't it? The constant gnawing in your stomach would be a perpetual reminder of your place in the Spartan system. It wasn't about individual comfort. It was about collective strength forged through shared hardship. And while you might fantasize about a glorious feast after a victorious battle, the reality was that even then, celebrations would be subdued, focused more on camaraderie and martial prowess than on culinary extravagance. The Spartan diet was less about satisfying hunger and more about cultivating a resilient, enduring spirit that could face any hardship, including the most basic one of all, going to bed hungry night after night. Alright, so you've got that constant, low-level hunger gnawing at your insides, a familiar companion by now. But what about something to cover those perpetually empty bellies? Forget your favorite hoodie or those comfy joggers. In Sparta, clothing was another tool for hardening, another discomfort to be endured. From the moment you entered the agoge, your wardrobe was minimalist to the extreme. You'd be given a single cloak, a rough, simple garment known as the tribon, and that was pretty much it. No changes for the seasons, no special outfits for different activities, just this one, unadorned piece of fabric. Imagine wearing the same scratchy, woolen blanket day in and day out, regardless of whether it's scorching hot or bitterly cold. Your modern self would be staging a fashion rebellion, or at the very least, shivering uncontrollably. This tribon was not designed for comfort or warmth. It was typically made of coarse wool, itchy against the skin, and certainly not sufficient to protect you from the biting winds of winter or the relentless sun of summer. You'd wear it constantly, sleeping in it, training in it, living in it. The idea was to accustom your body to the elements, to make you impervious to discomfort. If you were cold, you learned to generate your own warmth through movement or simply endure it. If you were hot, well, you were hot. This Spartan disdain for unnecessary clothing even extended to footwear. For much of your time in the agoge, you'd go barefoot. This wasn't because shoes were expensive or hard to come by. It was a deliberate choice to toughen your feet, to make them calloused and strong, capable of traversing any terrain without complaint. No fancy sneakers with gel inserts for you, just raw, unyielding foot power. The lack of varied clothing also served a practical purpose. It stripped away any semblance of individual identity through appearance. Everyone looked the same. There were no fashion statements, no personal flair, no way to distinguish yourself through what you wore. This reinforced the collective identity, the idea that you were part of a unified, indistinguishable whole serving the state. Historians still argue whether this uniformity truly suppressed individuality or simply redirected its expression into other, more martial forms of competition. Regardless, your internal monologue would likely be a constant complaint about chafing. Consider the sheer practicality of it all. Washing your single garment? Probably a rare luxury. Imagine the smell. Imagine the wear and tear. This wasn't just about hardship. It was about living a life utterly devoid of superficial concerns. Your value wasn't in your appearance, but in your physical prowess, your discipline, and your unwavering loyalty. Any modern person would look at a Spartan and probably wonder if they just escaped from a very committed nudist colony, given the minimal attire. It's a stark contrast to our world, where wardrobes are overflowing, and the perfect outfit can dictate your mood. One quirky tidbit about Spartan appearance. Even when they did wear armor for battle, it was remarkably simple compared to some of their Greek neighbors. While Athenians might have intricate designs on their shields or elaborate helmets, Spartan gear was functional, often unadorned. Their famous lambda, on the shield was their only real branding, a symbol of Laconia. It's a testament to their philosophy that substance overrode style in every aspect of life. You wouldn't catch a Spartan worrying about what to wear to a party because, well, there weren't really parties in the modern sense, and if there were, you'd still be in your trusty tribon. The constant exposure to the elements, the feel of rough fabric against your skin, the hard ground beneath your bare feet, all of these seemingly minor details added up to a relentless conditioning. Your body became a finely tuned instrument of endurance, accustomed to discomfort, almost thriving on it. This wasn't about surviving comfortably. It was about surviving effectively, no matter the conditions. So, next time you're fretting over what to wear, spare a thought for your ancient Spartan counterpart, trudging along in their single, scratchy cloak, completely unbothered by the concept of a bad hair day or a wrinkled shirt. There was no need for a laundry basket, only a strong will. So, you're hungry, wearing little more than a scratchy blanket, and now, where do you lay your head at night? Forget your cozy bedroom, the gentle glow of a bedside lamp, or even the questionable comfort of a futon. In ancient Sparta, your shelter was as Spartan as everything else. Communal, Spartan, pun intended, sorry, and utterly devoid of anything resembling personal space or comfort. From the age of 7, your home was the military barrack, a stark, utilitarian building shared with your agila. This wasn't a temporary measure. This was your living arrangement for decades, right up until you were a full-fledged warrior and possibly even after marriage. Your bed wasn't a bed at all, not in the sense we understand it. It was typically a mattress of reeds, gathered by your own hands from the Eurotas River. Imagine spending a portion of your day literally collecting your bedding material. These reeds weren't exactly plush. They were prickly, stiff, and offered minimal cushioning. Sometimes they might be mixed with thistledown for a bit of imagined softness, but let's be honest, it was still a far cry from a memory foam mattress. And a pillow? Forget about it. You might have used a hard lump of wood, or simply the ground. The idea wasn't to rest comfortably, but to harden your body, to accustom it to any surface, to make you resilient to discomfort even in sleep. You certainly wouldn't be counting sheep, you'd be counting aches. The barracks themselves were unheated, open to the elements, and incredibly basic. Imagine sleeping in a large, drafty room with dozens of other boys and young men. There were no individual sleeping quarters, no partitions for privacy. Everything was communal, reinforcing that core Spartan value of collective identity over individual needs. You'd huddle together for warmth in the winter, and probably sweat profusely in the summer. There were no amenities, no personal touches. Your existence was stripped down to the bare essentials. Food, what little there was, basic clothing, and a place to simply exist when you weren't training or fighting. This constant exposure to the elements, even during sleep, was another deliberate part of the conditioning. If you could sleep soundly, or at least endurably, on a reed bed in an unheated room, then sleeping on the hard ground during a military campaign would be no big deal. It instilled a robust physical constitution, making you impervious to the kind of environmental discomfort that would send most modern individuals running for the nearest five-star hotel. Historians still argue whether this extreme Spartan simplicity was purely ideological or partly a practical response to resource scarcity. Either way, you wouldn't be booking a stay there on Airbnb. One quirky tidbit about Spartan sleeping habits. It's said that even in the barracks, they sometimes slept with minimal cover, even in cold weather. This wasn't just a myth, it was part of their rigorous self-discipline. The idea was to develop an internal furnace, to become so tough that external conditions ceased to matter. You'd learn to conserve body heat, to find warmth in the proximity of your fellow Spartans, a kind of primal huddling for survival that forged bonds as strong as steel. It makes you think twice about complaining when your air conditioner is set just 1 degree off your ideal, doesn't it? The lack of a true home, the constant communal living, and the deliberate discomfort of your sleeping arrangements meant that your concept of home was fundamentally different from ours. Home wasn't a place of refuge and privacy. It was a continuation of your military training, a collective space where you were always on display, always part of the group. There was no escaping the demands of the state, not even when you closed your eyes. Every aspect of your life, right down to where you slept, was meticulously designed to serve one purpose: to create the ultimate warrior. And if you woke up with a stiff neck and a crick in your back, well, that was just another day in the life of a future Spartan hero. Alright, you're hungry, barely clothed, and sleeping on a bed of reeds. Now, let's talk about discipline. Forget timeouts, stern looks, or even grounding. In ancient Sparta, particularly during your time in the agoge, discipline wasn't just strict. It was brutal, immediate, and often incredibly painful. Corporal punishment wasn't a last resort. It was a fundamental tool, liberally applied for infractions that in your world would barely warrant a raised eyebrow. A wrong step in drill, a muttered complaint, a moment of hesitation, any of these could earn you a swift, stinging flogging. It wasn't about teaching you a lesson through reasoned argument. It was about conditioning you through pain, forging obedience through fear and endurance. Your paedonomos, the supervisor of your agoge group, wielded absolute authority. There was no appeal, no talking it out, no complaining to your parents. Their word was law, and their hand was quick to administer punishment. The goal wasn't just to correct behavior, but to break your will and rebuild it entirely in service of the state. You were expected to accept punishment silently, without a whimper, without a tear. Crying out, flinching, or showing any sign of weakness during a beating was considered a far greater offense than whatever action led to the punishment itself. It was a test of your stoicism, your ability to endure pain without betraying emotion, a crucial skill for a warrior facing the horrors of the battlefield. Imagine trying to keep a poker face while someone is actively trying to inflict pain on you. It's a level of self-control that most modern people can barely comprehend, let alone achieve. The methods of punishment were varied, but all were designed to be effective and memorable. Flogging with whips or rods was common. You might be forced to stand in awkward, painful positions for extended periods. Public shaming was also a powerful tool. If you failed a task or showed cowardice, you could be stripped naked and paraded before your peers, often subjected to their ridicule. This might sound less physically painful, but the psychological impact of such humiliation, especially in a society where honor was paramount, could be devastating. It ingrained a deep fear of disgrace, a powerful motivator to always perform at your best. One of the more quirky and frankly terrifying aspects of Spartan discipline was the encouragement of older boys to mentor, and also to discipline younger ones. This system, known as the Irenes, experienced youths, typically 19 to 20 years old, supervising the paids, younger boys, meant that discipline wasn't just top-down from adults. It was pervasive, coming from your slightly older peers as well. An iron could punish a younger boy for anything he deemed inappropriate, even for seemingly trivial things like not being respectful enough. This fostered a rigid hierarchy and ensured constant surveillance, leaving little room for misbehavior. It's like having your older sibling not just tell on you, but also be legally allowed to give you a good thrashing for leaving your socks on the floor. Historians still argue whether this extreme discipline was truly necessary to create effective soldiers, or if it also contributed to a society that was less adaptable and more resistant to change. Regardless, for you, living through it, it would mean a childhood utterly devoid of softness or comfort. Your body would bear the scars of countless punishments, and your mind would be conditioned to instantaneous obedience. You'd learn to anticipate authority, to suppress any rebellious instincts, and to channel your will into conforming to the Spartan ideal. There was no room for individual expression through defiance. Any such tendencies would be brutally stamped out. You wouldn't just learn to follow orders. You'd learn to become an order-following machine. So, when you consider the concept of tough love, remember ancient Sparta. Their version of love was less about tenderness and more about hammering you into an unyielding weapon for the state. You'd emerge from this crucible not just physically hardened, but with a deeply ingrained sense of duty, fear, and absolute adherence to the rules. And believe me, after years of this, the softest cushion you could imagine would be a welcome relief, even if you'd never admit it. You've endured the hunger, the flimsy clothes, the hard beds, and the brutal discipline. What was all this suffering for? Relentless physical grind, that's what. Your days in Sparta, from that tender age of 7, were a non-stop, punishing regimen of exercise and combat training designed to turn your body into a living weapon. Forget about recess, art class, or even a leisurely stroll. Your waking hours were dedicated to honing your physical prowess, pushing your limits until exhaustion was a familiar friend, and then pushing some more. Your training wasn't just about strength. It was about agility, speed, endurance, and coordination. You'd run cross-country, leap over obstacles, and wrestle relentlessly. Wrestling wasn't just a sport. It was a fundamental part of hand-to-hand combat training, teaching you how to grapple, throw, and subdue an opponent. Imagine being thrown around in the dirt, day in and day out, not for fun, but as a crucial part of your education. You'd practice with spears and swords, though often these would be blunted or wooden initially, simply to get the feel of the weapon and perfect your technique. There was no room for sloppiness. Precision in every movement was drilled into you. Swimming was also a vital skill, not just for leisure, but for military necessity, allowing you to cross rivers or engage in amphibious maneuvers. You'd train in all weather conditions, a continuation of that toughening philosophy. Snow, rain, scorching sun. None of it was an excuse to skip training. This wasn't about building bulging muscles for show. It was about building functional strength, the kind that allowed you to march for days, fight for hours, and then do it all again. Your physique would be lean, sinewy, and incredibly tough, a testament to the unyielding demands placed upon your body. One quirky tidbit about Spartan training involved dance. Yes, dance, but not the kind you might imagine. These were perikios dances, martial dances performed with weapons and shields, mimicking combat movements. They were less about grace and more about developing rhythm, coordination, and swift defensive and offensive maneuvers, often performed to the flute. So, while you wouldn't be doing the Macarena, you'd certainly be moving with purpose, albeit with less emphasis on fun. Historians still argue whether these dances were primarily for physical training or also served a ritualistic purpose, instilling warrior ethos through shared performance. Either way, you wouldn't be wearing your boogie shoes. The training extended beyond formal drills. Contests and competitions were constant, fostering rivalry and pushing you to outdo your peers. These weren't just for glory. They were miniature battles, sharpening your competitive edge and preparing you for the ultimate contest: war. Every day was a test, every interaction a potential challenge. You were expected to learn quickly, adapt, and never show weakness. Failure wasn't an option. It was a disgrace that could lead to brutal punishment. Even your rare moments of leisure would be spent on activities that reinforced your military purpose. Hunting, for instance, wasn't just for food. It was a way to practice tracking, stealth, and weapon skills. It further honed your instincts and made you comfortable in the wilderness. You wouldn't be playing video games. You'd be tracking wild boars. Your entire existence was a seamless flow from one form of training to another, leaving no time or inclination for pursuits that didn't directly contribute to your development as a warrior. You were a living, breathing project, perpetually under construction, constantly being refined for the battlefield. So, while your modern self might occasionally hit the gym for an hour or two, imagine that level of intensity, not just for a few hours a week, but every single day, for years on end, from dawn till dusk. Your body would be a testament to incredible endurance, a machine finely tuned for one purpose: war. And honestly, by the end of it, a gentle yoga session would probably feel like an extreme sport. So, you're a lean, mean fighting machine honed by relentless training and hardship. But Sparta had another, darker side to its system, a shadow operation that truly exemplified its brutal efficiency: the Cryptia. This wasn't just another training exercise. It was a secret police unit, composed of promising young Spartan men, typically in their late teens. And you, if you were deemed particularly cunning and ruthless, might very well have found yourself initiated into its chilling ranks. This wasn't about parades and glory. It was about stealth, terror, and systematic suppression. The purpose of the Cryptia was singularly grim: to control the Helots. Remember those poor souls, the enslaved Messenians and Laconians who formed the vast majority of Sparta's population? They were the backbone of the Spartan economy, doing all the agricultural work, allowing the Spartans to dedicate themselves entirely to military pursuits. But their sheer numbers, far outnumbering the Spartans themselves, made them a constant threat of rebellion. The Cryptia was Sparta's brutal solution to this demographic imbalance, a means of maintaining absolute fear and control. Your mission, if you were chosen for the Cryptia, would be to operate covertly, often at night, in the Helot-populated countryside. You'd be given minimal supplies, expected to live off the land, surviving by your wits and stealth, much like a hunter stalking prey. And your prey, terrifyingly, were the Helots themselves. Your task was not merely to observe or report. It was to eliminate any Helots deemed a threat, particularly those who were strong, intelligent, or showed signs of leadership. Imagine being told, "Go out there, kill anyone who seems a bit too confident, and make sure no one sees you doing it." This wasn't just a military exercise. It was sanctioned murder, a state-sponsored campaign of terror. The methods were simple: assassination. You would lie in ambush, often alone or in small groups, and murder Helots caught outside their homes, or those who simply seemed too assertive or defiant. It was designed to send a clear, chilling message: resistance was futile, and no Helot was safe. This wasn't combat in the heroic sense. It was cold-blooded, preemptive striking, an ultimate expression of Spartan ruthlessness. Historians still argue intensely about the exact nature and frequency of Cryptia operations. Was it a constant, widespread campaign, or a more sporadic, targeted form of intimidation? The ancient sources are vague, but the chilling implications remain. It certainly wasn't a job you'd put on your LinkedIn profile. One particularly grim, quirky tidbit related to the Cryptia was the annual declaration of war against the Helots. Each year, Spartan magistrates would formally declare war on the Helots. This seemingly bizarre ritual served a very practical purpose. It absolved Spartans of the religious guilt of murder. By officially being at war, any killing of a helot, particularly by the Cryptia, was considered a legitimate act of combat, rather than an act of murder. It's a shocking demonstration of how deeply ingrained the control of the helots was, and how the Spartans manipulated their own legal and religious frameworks to justify their oppressive system. You probably wouldn't find this on a UNESCO cultural heritage list. Living through the Cryptia, whether as a participant or simply aware of its existence, would have a profound impact. As a Spartan youth, it meant accepting, and perhaps participating in, unspeakable acts, further hardening your moral compass and solidifying your loyalty to a system that relied on terror. You'd become proficient in stealth, in lethal force, and in the art of living without detection. It would solidify the idea that the helots were not human beings deserving of rights, but merely property, a permanent underclass to be controlled by any means necessary. And as a helot, knowing the Cryptia prowled the nights, your life would be a constant state of fear. Every shadow a potential assassin, every confident stride a risk. This was the dark underbelly of Spartan perfection, a necessary horror that ensured their continued dominance. You've survived birth, the agoge, constant hunger, minimal clothing, hard beds, brutal discipline, and perhaps even the chilling operations of the Cryptia. Now, what about matters of the heart? Love, romance, marriage? Forget everything you know about weddings, engagement rings, or even dating apps. In ancient Sparta, marriage was a utilitarian affair, completely stripped of sentimentality and steeped in peculiar, almost bizarre, traditions. And for you, a young Spartan man, your wedding would be less about a loving union and more about a clandestine abduction, followed by a deeply secretive marital life. When you reached your prime, typically around 20, and had proven yourself worthy in the agoge, the state would expect you to marry. This wasn't a choice. It was a duty, essential for producing the next generation of Spartan warriors. But instead of courtship, your betrothal would often begin with a staged abduction. Yes, you heard that right. The bride, typically around 18 to 20 years old, would be seized by a few of your friends, almost as if she were a piece of property. There was no grand proposal, no gentle wooing. It was a rather blunt, unromantic affair, a sort of mock kidnapping that symbolized the warrior ethos even in marriage. After this abduction, the bride would have her head shaved, be dressed in men's clothing, and left alone in a dark room. You, the groom, would then sneak away from your syssitia, communal dining hall, where you still lived, enter the room, and consummate the marriage in secret. The entire affair was designed to be quick, clandestine, and focused solely on procreation. There was no elaborate ceremony, no feasting, no public declarations of love. It was a functional act, performed under the cloak of night, a testament to how even personal relationships were subservient to the needs of the state. It certainly makes your friend's overly elaborate engagement story sound a bit much. This secrecy continued long after the initial marriage. For years, even after you were officially married, you wouldn't live with your wife. You'd continue to reside in the barracks with your fellow warriors, eating, sleeping, and training communally. Your visits to your wife would be brief, secretive, and typically under the cover of darkness. Imagine having to sneak out of your own home just to see your spouse. This unusual arrangement was designed to keep you constantly focused on your military duties, preventing the comforts of domestic life from softening your resolve or distracting you from your comrades. Historians still argue whether this prolonged separation truly fostered military discipline or merely led to widespread frustration and alternative arrangements. The goal of these secret liaisons was, of course, children. The state encouraged procreation, especially of healthy male offspring. Spartan women, having gone through their own rigorous physical training, were expected to produce strong sons. If you failed to produce children, or particularly if you failed to produce sons, you could face public ridicule and even social penalties. There was immense pressure to contribute to the next generation of warriors. The value of your marriage was measured not in emotional connection, but in its biological output. One quirky tidbit related to Spartan marriage customs was the concept of wife sharing, or rather, having children with someone else's wife for the good of the state. If a man was older and his wife was young and fertile, he might lend her to a younger, more vigorous man to produce healthy offspring. Conversely, if a man had a particularly virtuous and fertile wife, he might allow a friend to have children with her, ensuring that good stock was perpetuated. This wasn't seen as adultery in the modern sense, but as a pragmatic, state-sanctioned way to ensure the continuation of strong bloodlines. It's safe to say your marriage counselor would have a field day with that one. So, your marital life would be a strange blend of duty, secrecy, and biological imperative. There was little room for individual preference or emotional attachment. Your wife was a partner in the production of future Spartans, and your relationship, like every other aspect of your life, was structured to serve the relentless demands of the state. You certainly wouldn't be exchanging "I love yous" over a candlelit dinner. So, you've navigated the bizarre landscape of Spartan marriage, producing future warriors as your civic duty, all while still living in the barracks. Because for you, a Spartan man, life wasn't just about the military. It was the military. From the moment you turned 7 until the day you died, your existence was defined by perpetual preparedness, a ceaseless readiness for war. There was no retirement, no career change, no leisurely pursuits outside of your martial duties. You were a soldier, first and foremost, always and forever. Even after you graduated from the agoge at around age 20, you weren't suddenly a free man. You became a hoplite, a full citizen soldier, but your life remained entirely state-controlled. You would join your sesisha, the mandatory dining group, where you'd share meals and camaraderie with 10 to 15 other men. This wasn't just a mess hall. It was a unit, a brotherhood forged in shared hardship and a constant reminder of your collective identity. You were expected to contribute a certain amount of food and wine to your sesisha from your land, worked by helots, of course. Failure to do so could mean losing your citizenship, a fate worse than death for a Spartan. Your days would still be dominated by military training. While the intense physical drills of the agoge might ease slightly, you'd now focus on more advanced tactics, perfecting your phalanx formations and mastering weapon handling. Mock battles and drills were constant, ensuring that every Spartan warrior was always at peak readiness. There was no off-season. War could break out at any moment, and you were expected to be ready to march at a moment's notice, leaving your secret wife, if you even had one by then, and any children without a second glance. Your loyalty belonged to Sparta and your brothers in arms, above all else. Consider the mental toll of such a life. Every decision, every action was framed by the needs of the military state. Your identity was entirely subsumed by your role as a warrior. Personal ambition, individual desires, or even nuanced philosophical thought were not only discouraged but actively suppressed. You were a cog in a perfectly oiled, albeit brutal, war machine. It's hard to imagine, in our age of self-expression and diverse careers, a life so utterly singular in its focus. You wouldn't be pondering the meaning of life. You'd be pondering the most effective way to stab your enemy. One mainstream historical fact that highlights this perpetual military focus is the story of Thermopylae. While often glorified, it perfectly encapsulates the Spartan warrior ethos. Unwavering duty, ultimate sacrifice, and a commitment to fighting to the last man. For you, this wasn't just a historical anecdote. It was the ultimate ideal, the standard you were expected to live up to. Death in battle, especially a glorious one, was the highest honor. Retreat or surrender, on the other hand, was the ultimate disgrace, leading to social ostracism and a life of utter shame. A quirky tidbit: Spartan warriors were known for meticulously grooming their long hair before battle. This wasn't vanity in our modern sense, but a ritualistic act, a final preparation before facing death. Imagine the scene. Amidst the chaos of impending battle, a group of stoic, hardened warriors calmly braiding each other's hair. It seems utterly at odds with their harsh image, but it was part of their unique warrior culture, a moment of calm and focus before the storm. Historians still argue whether this was purely ceremonial or also served a practical purpose, like keeping hair out of their eyes during combat. Either way, it's a surprising glimpse into their rituals. Your entire life was geared towards the ultimate purpose: dying gloriously for Sparta. Your training, your community, your family life, everything was subordinate to this overarching goal. You would spend decades honing your body and mind for battle, and when the call came, you would answer without hesitation. There was no option for conscientious objection, no way to opt out. Your life was a testament to the unyielding demands of a society built on the bedrock of military might. Alright, so we've established that your life as a Spartan man was a non-stop military boot camp. But what about the other half of the population? What about the women? Here's where ancient Sparta throws a curveball at your modern sensibilities. While Spartan women certainly didn't fight in phalanxes or participate in the cryptia, their role was far from the cloistered, domestic existence of women in other Greek city-states like Athens. In many ways, they enjoyed an unexpected level of freedom and influence, though always within the strict confines of Spartan societal norms. Unlike Athenian women, who were largely confined to the home, Spartan girls also underwent rigorous physical training, though not the full military agoge of the boys. From a young age, they exercised regularly, running, wrestling, and throwing javelins and discuses. This wasn't for combat readiness in the direct sense, but for a very pragmatic purpose: to produce strong, healthy babies, especially sons, who would become the next generation of Spartan warriors. The belief was that strong mothers made strong children. Imagine your modern gym class, but with a much higher stakes agenda: the genetic future of your nation. This emphasis on physical prowess meant Spartan women were known for their athletic builds and robust health. They wore simpler, often shorter tunics, peplos, than women in other Greek cities, which allowed for greater freedom of movement during exercise. This less restrictive clothing often shocked other Greeks, who viewed it as immodest. There's a famous, somewhat sassy, quote attributed to a foreign woman who remarked that Spartan women were the only ones who could rule their men. A Spartan woman, Gorgo, the wife of King Leonidas, supposedly retorted, "Yes, because we are the only ones who give birth to men." Burn. Spartan women also had significant economic power. With their husbands constantly away in the barracks or on campaign, women managed the household estates, which included overseeing the helot labor that worked their land. They could own and inherit property, a right largely denied to women in other Greek city-states. By the classical period, Spartan women collectively owned a substantial portion of the land, estimated by Aristotle to be as much as 2/5 of all Spartan territory. This gave them considerable influence and autonomy within the domestic sphere, far more than their Athenian counterparts. Historians still argue about the precise extent of their economic influence and whether this translated into genuine political power. One mainstream historical fact highlighting their relative freedom is that Spartan women could move about the city freely, engage in public athletic competitions, and even converse with men outside their family, something considered scandalous elsewhere. They weren't secluded behind high walls. They were visible, active participants in the public life of Sparta, albeit in roles distinct from men. They were the proud mothers of warriors, the managers of estates, and the bearers of the Spartan ideal of strength and resilience. A quirky tidbit. Spartan women were also known for their fierce, almost terrifying stoicism when it came to their sons going to war. There's the famous story of a Spartan mother handing her son his shield with the command, "Come back with it or on it," meaning return victorious with your shield, or return dead, carried upon it. There was no room for sentimental tears or pleas for safety. Their ultimate pride lay in their son's bravery and sacrifice for Sparta. This iron-willed resolve was just as much a part of the Spartan warrior ethos as the men's training. So, while your life as a Spartan man was one of unending military service, Spartan women, though not warriors themselves, were the vital bedrock upon which that military society stood. They were strong, independent, economically empowered, and fiercely devoted to the Spartan ideal, playing a crucial, if different, role in perpetuating the state's unique way of life. They were less about delicate femininity and more about robust, unflinching pragmatism. You've seen the rigorous training of Spartan men and the surprising autonomy of Spartan women. But underpinning this entire peculiar society was a vast, silent, and deeply oppressed class, the Helots. If you were a Spartan citizen, your entire existence, your training, your military readiness, your communal meals, was made possible by the forced labor of these enslaved people. And if, by some twist of fate, you were a Helot, well, your life would be a constant, grinding struggle for survival, marked by brutal exploitation and perpetual fear. The Helots were not chattel slaves in the same way, say, Roman slaves were bought and sold individually. They were a collective, state-owned class tied to the land they worked. Primarily, they were the conquered inhabitants of Messenia and Laconia, subjugated by the Spartans over centuries. Imagine an entire ethnic group, stripped of their freedom, forced to farm the land and provide the Spartans with food and resources. This vast agricultural output was the economic engine of Sparta, freeing every Spartan citizen from manual labor, allowing them to dedicate their lives solely to military training and warfare. Your experience as a Spartan citizen would involve constant interaction with the Helots, albeit from a position of absolute power. You'd witness their labor, enforce their obedience, and be taught from a young age that they were an inferior, dangerous class to be kept in check. Your contribution to your syssitia, that communal dining group we talked about, came from the produce harvested by Helots on your allotted land. It was a clear, direct benefit, reminding you constantly of your privileged position, a position built on the backs of others. The Spartans maintained their control over the vastly more numerous Helots through a system of institutionalized terror and casual brutality. The Cryptia, which you may or may not have participated in, was just one manifestation of this. Beyond that, Helots were forbidden from leaving their allotted land without permission, they couldn't marry outside their group, and they had virtually no rights. They were subject to arbitrary violence, designed to instill fear and prevent rebellion. It wasn't uncommon for Spartans to publicly humiliate Helots, or even kill them, as a stark reminder of their subjugated status. This constant oppression, however, also created an ever-present internal threat, forcing Sparta to remain vigilant and militarized. Historians still argue about the extent of Helot rebellions and how consistently Sparta lived in fear of them, but the system itself clearly shows deep-seated anxiety. One mainstream historical fact that underscores the Helot problem: the devastating earthquake of 464 BCE. This natural disaster crippled Sparta, causing massive casualties and infrastructure damage. It also provided a golden opportunity for the Helots in Messenia to launch a massive rebellion, which took the Spartans years of brutal fighting to finally suppress. This event highlights just how fragile the Spartan system was, resting on a powder keg of resentment. A quirky tidbit that further illustrates the Helots' plight. It's said that Helots were sometimes forced to get drunk and then perform humiliating dances or songs for Spartan youths. This wasn't for entertainment. It was a grotesque lesson, designed to demonstrate the negative effects of alcohol and to reinforce the helots' supposedly inferior nature in the minds of young Spartans. Imagine being forced to debase yourself for the amusement and moral instruction of your oppressors. It's a chilling example of psychological warfare. So, if you were a helot, your days would be filled with backbreaking labor, constant surveillance, and the ever-present threat of violence. There would be no escape, no upward mobility, and no hope for a better life. You would be a living engine of the Spartan war machine, a stark reminder that beneath the gleaming facade of Spartan military glory lay a foundation of profound human suffering. Your life would be a grim counterpoint to the Spartan citizen's privileged existence, proving that freedom, even in ancient times, often came at someone else's agonizing expense. So, you've seen the Spartans as fierce warriors, their women as strong managers, and the helots as their exploited labor force. But how did this unique society function without, say, a booming stock market or a bustling trade hub? The answer lies in their economy, which was deliberately austere, almost aggressively anti-wealth, and utterly unique in the ancient world. If you, a modern individual, were dropped into Spartan daily life, your concept of money, luxury, and material possessions would be completely alien, perhaps even offensive to them. Forget shiny gold coins or easy credit cards. Sparta famously used iron currency, and not just any iron. These were cumbersome, unwieldy iron bars, often deliberately debased to make them even heavier and less convenient for trade. Imagine trying to buy a loaf of bread with a heavy, rusty piece of metal that weighed several pounds. This wasn't because they lacked the technology for coinage. It was a deliberate policy attributed to the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus, designed to discourage foreign trade, prevent accumulation of wealth, and promote self-sufficiency. The idea was to make it so impractical to hoard or transport money that luxury goods simply wouldn't find their way into Sparta. You wouldn't be seeing any ancient Gucci stores here. This rejection of material wealth was a core tenet of Spartan ideology. They believed that the pursuit of riches corrupted character, softened the body, and distracted citizens from their primary duty, military service. Public displays of wealth were frowned upon, even punished. There was no social climbing through opulent homes or fancy chariots. Your status was earned through your martial prowess, your obedience to the state, and your contribution to the common good, not through how many helots you owned or how much iron currency you had buried in your backyard. This deliberate austerity cultivated a remarkable sense of equality among Spartan citizens, at least superficially. Because of this anti-luxury stance, Sparta had very little in the way of art, elaborate architecture, or sophisticated crafts compared to other Greek city-states. Their pottery was utilitarian, their buildings functional, and their focus remained squarely on military efficiency. This isn't to say they had no culture, but it was a culture profoundly shaped by their martial ideals. Their poetry and music often revolved around themes of courage, sacrifice, and the glory of battle. You wouldn't find a Spartan debating the merits of abstract art. They'd be debating the merits of a new spear design. One quirky tidbit about Spartan economic life. While individual Spartans were forbidden from accumulating wealth, the state itself did maintain considerable resources, primarily in the form of land and the helot labor force. The wealth existed, but it was collectively managed for the benefit of the military machine, not for individual enrichment. It's like a massive, state-run cooperative where the only dividend is continued military dominance. Historians still argue about the true economic motivations behind Lycurgus's reforms. Was it purely ideological, or a pragmatic response to the unique challenges of maintaining control over a massive helot population? The result of this austere economy was a society remarkably resistant to external influences and internal class distinctions, among citizens at least. There was no merchant class vying for power, No artisans introducing foreign ideas through their crafts. Sparta was a closed system, self-contained and focused on preserving its unique way of life. For you, living in such a system, it would mean a life utterly devoid of consumerism, of the latest gadgets, or even simple comforts. Your possessions would be few and functional, your tribon, your weapons, and perhaps a small personal chest. No overflowing closets, no Amazon wish lists. This economic philosophy reinforced everything else about Spartan life. The hunger, the simple clothes, the communal living, the constant training. It was all interconnected, a cohesive system designed to produce the ultimate warrior state, free from the distractions and corruptions that wealth, they believed, brought. It might make you appreciate your morning coffee run and its diverse payment options a little more, wouldn't it? You've seen the Spartans' rigid social structures, their peculiar economy, and their relentless military focus. Now, let's talk about how this all held together, how decisions were made, and where you, as a Spartan citizen, would fit into the unique political landscape. Forget your modern concepts of democracy with widespread voting, individual rights, or even a king who lives in a palace and rules unilaterally. Sparta operated under a complex, almost paradoxical system. An oligarchy with two kings, designed to create a delicate balance of power and prevent any single entity from becoming too dominant. At the very top of the Spartan political pyramid were the two kings, representing two distinct royal families, the Agiads and the Eurypontids. This diarchy was an unusual arrangement among Greek city-states, and its primary purpose was to act as a check on each other's power. One king typically led the army in times of war, while the other remained in Sparta. This meant no single king could accumulate too much military or political authority, preventing tyranny. Imagine the awkward family dinners, though, if your co-ruler was also your rival. Historians still argue whether this system truly prevented tyranny or simply shifted power struggles into different arenas. Below the kings, and arguably more powerful in day-to-day governance, was the Gerousia, the Council of Elders. This body consisted of 28 men, all over the age of 60, elected for life, plus the two kings. To be elected to the Gerousia was the ultimate honor for a Spartan man, a testament to a lifetime of service and adherence to Spartan ideals. They held immense power, preparing legislation to be presented to the assembly, acting as a supreme court, and having the final say on most matters of state. Their age was key. It was believed that their wisdom and experience would guide Sparta wisely, ensuring adherence to traditional laws. Then there were the ephors, perhaps the most powerful and unique political institution in Sparta. These 5 magistrates were elected annually by the assembly. More on that in a moment. Their power was immense. They oversaw the agoge, managed the Helot population, conducted foreign policy, and could even preside over trials, including those of the kings. They served for only 1 year, but their authority during that time was virtually absolute. This annual election was designed to prevent any ephor from accumulating too much personal power over time. It was a rapid rotation of supreme executive authority, designed to keep everyone on their toes. Finally, there was the Apella, the assembly of all male Spartan citizens over the age of 30. This was where you would participate. However, don't imagine impassioned debates or nuanced discussions. The Apella didn't debate. It simply voted on proposals put before it by the Gerousia or ephors. And the voting method was quite unique. Instead of raising hands or casting ballots, citizens voted by acclamation, shouting and stamping their feet. The louder the shout, the more support for the proposal. The ephors would then judge which side was louder. Imagine trying to get a quiet, reasoned argument heard in that cacophony. It was a system designed to favor conformity and discourage dissent. One mainstream historical fact about Spartan politics is their remarkable stability compared to many other Greek city-states. which frequently experienced coups and democratic upheavals. The checks and balances built into the Spartan system, however brutal, contributed to this political longevity. They valued stability above almost all else, even above individual liberty. A quirky tidbit: the efforts were so powerful that they could fine the kings, initiate investigations against them, and even depose them if they believed the kings were acting against the interests of Sparta. Every 9 years, the Ephors would even observe the heavens for signs, and if they saw a falling star, they could use it as a pretext to suspend the kings from office until an oracle confirmed their fitness to rule. It's like a cosmic impeachment clause. For you, living in this system, it would mean a life of strict obedience to authority, with very limited avenues for individual political expression. Your voice in the assembly was literally just one shout among many. Your role was to serve, to obey, and to trust that the complex machinery of Spartan governance, however strange, was working for the collective good of the state. It certainly makes choosing between presidential candidates or arguing about local zoning laws feel like a very different kind of civic engagement. So, you've lived your life as a Spartan. You've endured the hunger, the relentless training, the bizarre marriage customs, the iron currency, and the peculiar political system, all for one overarching purpose: to serve Sparta. And for a Spartan, your ultimate destiny, your truest glory, lay in death, specifically a glorious death in battle. Conversely, the worst possible fate, a life utterly devoid of honor, was to survive a battle in disgrace. From your earliest days in the agoge, the concept of dying for Sparta was drilled into you. It wasn't presented as a tragedy, but as the pinnacle of achievement, the ultimate expression of your loyalty and courage. Your epitaph would be short and to the point: died for Sparta. There were no elaborate funeral monuments for individual citizens unless they died in battle. The most revered graves were those of men who fell fighting for their city, or women who died in childbirth, both seen as ultimate sacrifices for the state. Your life had one purpose, and its glorious end was the fulfillment of that purpose. Imagine standing in the phalanx, shield locked with your comrades, facing down an enemy force. The fear would be immense, primal, but overridden by a far greater dread: the fear of shame. To turn and run, to drop your shield, to survive when your comrades fell, this was the ultimate dishonor, a stain that would follow you for the rest of your life. Such an individual, a trembler, meaning one who trembled or quaked, would be ostracized. You couldn't sit with your Sicilian members at meals. You'd be forced to wear distinct clothing. No one would speak to you, and you'd have no political rights. Marriage would be impossible even if you could find someone willing. Life as a trembler was a living death, a perpetual reminder of your cowardice, far worse than a quick, honorable end on the battlefield. This absolute dichotomy, glory in death versus shame in survival, created an incredibly disciplined and formidable fighting force. Spartans didn't retreat because the social consequences of doing so were simply too dire. They fought to the last man, not just out of courage, but out of an unshakable adherence to their societal code. This mainstream historical fact is perhaps the most defining characteristic of the Spartan warrior: their refusal to yield. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off a vast Persian army, is the enduring symbol of this ethos. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates this fear of shame: there are stories of Spartans who were the sole survivors of battles, sent home in disgrace, who would then hang themselves rather than live with the dishonor. Even in their final moments, their actions were dictated by the rigid societal code. It highlights the profound psychological conditioning that permeated every aspect of Spartan life. Historians still argue about the precise psychological impact of this extreme emphasis on shame and honor. Was it truly internalized virtue, or simply a potent form of social coercion? Your life, from the moment of that initial inspection, was a preparation for this ultimate moment of truth. Every meal, every punishment, every drill, every secret marital visit, it all pointed towards your duty on the battlefield. You weren't an individual seeking happiness or personal fulfillment. You were a weapon, forged for the defense and glory of Sparta. And if that meant dying in a shower of spears, then so be it. It was the only way to truly live in the eyes of your Spartan society. So, as you consider the very real comforts of your bed right now, the simple freedom to choose your path, to pursue your own version of happiness, spare a thought for the Spartan. His life was a testament to unyielding discipline, sacrifice, and an almost terrifying dedication to a singular ideal. He was not free in the way you understand it, but he achieved a kind of collective greatness through absolute, unflinching commitment. The soft hum of your fan, the comfortable weight of your blanket, the quiet peace of your room, these are luxuries that would have been unimaginable to our Spartan friend tonight. His world was one of constant striving, of raw physical and mental endurance. No soft edges, no gentle whispers. Every breath was a testament to a system that demanded perfection, a life lived on the razor's edge between glory and utter shame. As you drift now, let the images of stark barracks and gruff commands fade. Let the imagined gnaw of hunger recede, replaced by the deep satisfaction of your own comfort and security. The sun is setting in Vietnam right now, painting the sky with colors a Spartan would never have paused to admire, too busy with his drills. Your own worries, perhaps, feel a little lighter now, a little less pressing, when measured against the unyielding demands of an ancient life. Close your eyes, let the story settle, and let your body relax into the quiet comfort of your own modern world.